The morning sun beat down on Fort Jackson in South Carolina, turning the training field into a furnace. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stood at the edge of the obstacle course, her arms crossed, watching the new batch of recruits stumble through their drills. At 34 years old, she had spent 14 years in the Army. She had served 2 tours overseas, earned a Bronze Star, and trained hundreds of soldiers. But when she looked at the 5 young men gathered near the water station, she knew exactly what they were thinking. "Check out the babysitter they gave us," one of them said, loud enough for her to hear. His name was Brent Collins, a muscular 22-year-old from Texas who thought his high school football career made him invincible. 5 foot, nothing telling us how to be soldiers. The others laughed. Maya had heard it all before. At 5 feet 2 inches tall and barely 120 pounds, she did not look like what most people imagined when they thought of a combat veteran. Her slight frame and quiet demeanor made recruits underestimate her every single time. She had learned long ago that trying to demand respect with words was pointless. Actions spoke louder. "Collins," she called out, her voice carrying across the field without her needing to shout. "Since you seem to have energy to spare, why don't you show everyone how it's done? Run the course for me." Brent smirked at his friends and sauntered over to the starting line. The obstacle course at Fort Jackson was not the hardest in the military, but it was no joke. Rope climbs, wall scaling, crawling under barbed wire, tire runs, and a final sprint that left most recruits gasping for air. Maya clicked her stopwatch as Brent took off. He was fast, she would give him that. His football training showed in his speed and agility. But as she watched him muscle his way over the walls and power through the tires, she saw what she always saw in recruits like him. He was relying purely on strength. No technique, no efficiency, no understanding of how to conserve energy for when it really mattered. He finished in just under 8 minutes, which was decent for a first attempt. He jogged back to Maya, barely winded, that same cocky smile on his face. "Not bad, Collins," Maya said evenly. "But you're wasting movement. You're using twice the energy you need on every obstacle." "Seemed to work just fine, ma'am," Brent replied, the title dripping with sarcasm. The other 4 recruits gathered around. There was Jake Morrison, a farm kid from Iowa with hands like sledgehammers. Marcus Webb, who had enlisted after flunking out of college. Tommy Nguyen, quiet but clearly following Brent's lead. And Derek Price, the oldest of the group at 25, who had that look in his eye that said he thought he already knew everything. "You think you could do better?" Derek asked Maya, his tone challenging. Maya looked at each of them in turn. This was the moment that happened in almost every training cycle. The moment when the recruits who thought they were tough decided to test her. She could report them for disrespect. She could smoke them with punishment exercises until they could barely stand. But Maya had learned that neither of those approaches truly earned respect. "I'll make you a deal," Maya said calmly. "I'll run the course. If I beat Collins' time, you 5 spend the rest of the day doing whatever training I assign without complaint. Every single exercise, every single order." "And if you don't beat it?" Brent asked. "Then I'll let you run training your way for the afternoon," Maya said. "You can do whatever exercises you want, take breaks when you want. I'll just observe." The recruits exchanged glances. To them, this seemed like a gift. They were looking at this small woman who probably weighed half what Brent did, and they were calculating that there was no way she could match his time, let alone beat it. "Deal," Brent said, extending his hand. Maya shook it firmly. Then she walked to the starting line, removing her jacket to reveal her standard-issue PT shirt. The scars on her arms were visible now, thin white lines that spoke of injuries these young men could not imagine. She did not do elaborate stretches or warm-up routines. She simply stood at the line, took 3 deep breaths, and nodded. "Go ahead," she said to the recruit holding the stopwatch. The moment he clicked the timer, Maya exploded forward. The first obstacle was a series of hurdles. Where Brent had jumped over each one with both feet, wasting height and energy, Maya barely cleared them, her form perfect, each movement flowing into the next. The rope climb came next. Brent had pulled himself up with pure arm strength. Maya wrapped the rope around her leg in a technique that let her use her entire body, ascending twice as fast with half the effort. The wall seemed impossible for someone her size, but Maya hit it at a run, planted one foot on a small ledge that most recruits did not even notice, and used her momentum to carry herself up and over. The barbed wire crawl was where she truly showed her experience. While recruits always tried to stay high to move faster, Maya stayed low and flat, gliding across the ground like a snake, never once snagging the wire. The tire run was a rhythm exercise. Maya's feet barely touched each tire before moving to the next, a perfect pattern that looked almost like dancing. And then came the final sprint. This was where Brent's size had worked against him, his muscle mass requiring more oxygen, his lungs burning. Maya's smaller frame was built for endurance. She crossed the finish line and stopped, her breathing elevated but controlled. The recruit with the stopwatch stared at the numbers, his mouth open. "Well," Maya asked, her voice steady. 6 minutes 42 seconds, ma'am," he stammered. The 5 recruits who had made the bet stood in stunned silence. Maya had not just beaten Brent's time, she had destroyed it. More than a full minute faster, and she looked like she could turn around and run it again. Brent's face had gone red. "You got lucky," he muttered. "The course was wet when I ran it. Conditions were different." Maya walked over to him, looking up at his face. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried an edge that made every recruit on the field stop what they were doing and listen. "I ran that course in Iraq with 40 pounds of gear, after being awake for 36 hours, while people were shooting at us," she said. "I've run it in rain, in mud, in heat that makes today feel like air conditioning. You want to talk about conditions being different? The only condition that's different is that you thought size and strength were all that mattered. You're learning today that they're not." She stepped back and looked at all 5 of them. "A deal is a deal," Maya said. "For the rest of the day, you do exactly what I tell you. No questions, no attitude, we clear." One by one, they nodded. Even Brent, though it clearly killed him to do it. "Outstanding," Maya said. "Let's begin with a 5-mile run, full gear, form up." As the recruits scrambled to grab their packs, Maya allowed herself the smallest smile. It was going to be a long day for them, but maybe, just maybe, they would learn something. Not just about physical training, but about respect, about humility, about understanding that the toughest warriors did not always come in the biggest packages. What none of them knew yet, including Maya, was that this was just the beginning. In 3 days, a situation would unfold that would test everything these recruits thought they knew about strength, courage, and what it really meant to be a soldier. And when that moment came, the lesson Maya taught them today on the obstacle course would be the very thing that kept them alive. The next 3 days passed in a blur of intense training. True to their agreement, the 5 recruits followed Maya's every instruction without complaint, though she could see the resentment still simmering beneath the surface. Brent, in particular, performed each exercise with barely concealed anger, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. But Maya also saw something else beginning to happen. When she showed them the proper technique for climbing, Jake from Iowa started using it and found he could scale obstacles he had struggled with before. When she taught them how to distribute weight in their packs, Marcus stopped getting the burning shoulder pain that had plagued him all week. Slowly, grudgingly, they were learning that her methods worked. On the 4th day, everything changed. Maya was in the armory conducting a weapons safety inspection when Lieutenant Colonel Paul Hendricks walked in. Hendricks was the base commander, a man in his early 50s with gray hair and a reputation for running Fort Jackson like a tight ship. He had always been professional with Maya, but she had never quite felt he saw her as anything more than a competent instructor. "Staff Sergeant Chen," he said, his expression grave. "I need you in the briefing room, now." Maya secured the weapon she had been inspecting and followed him across the base. The briefing room was filled with a dozen officers and senior NCOs, all studying a map spread across the table. Captain Rodriguez, the head of advanced training, looked up when Maya entered. "We have a situation," Rodriguez said without preamble. 3 hours ago, a civilian contractor went missing during a supply run to the northern training range. John Matthews, 62 years old, retired Army. He was supposed to deliver equipment to the range and return by noon. never showed up. His truck was found abandoned on the access road, engines still running. Maya's stomach tightened. The northern training range was 15,000 acres of dense pine forest and rough terrain. It was used for advanced survival training and field exercises. Easy to get lost in, especially if you did not know the area. "Search and rescue?" she asked. "We've got a team assembling now," Hendricks said. "But here's the complication. We've got severe thunderstorms rolling in within 2 hours. Once they hit, we'll have to pull everyone out. Lightning, flash flood potential, the works. We need teams moving now to cover as much ground as possible before the weather shuts us down." "I can take a team," Maya said immediately. Rodriguez shook his head. "You're needed here. We've got that visiting delegation from the Defense Department arriving tonight. Someone needs to coordinate the demonstration exercises with the recruits." "Sir, with respect, finding a missing man is more important than a dog and pony show for bureaucrats," Maya said, her voice firm. Hendricks looked like he wanted to agree but was bound by protocol. "The delegation is high priority, Chen, Senator's office. We need our best people on it." "Then let me take a small team just to cover the eastern sector," Maya pressed. "That's where Matthews would have been heading based on his route. Give me 2 hours. If we have not found anything by then, we pull back before the weather hits." Hendricks considered this, then nodded. "Fine, take whoever you need, but you're on a tight clock." Maya left the briefing room and headed straight to the training field. Her mind was already calculating. She needed people who could move fast, follow orders without question, and handle rough terrain. Experienced soldiers would be ideal, but they were all being assigned to other search sectors. Then she saw them, the 5 recruits. They were running drills, practicing the techniques she had taught them. Without hesitation, Maya made her decision. "Collins, Morrison, Webb, Nguyen, Price," she called out. "Gear up. Full field packs, water, first aid. You've got 5 minutes." Brent jogged over, confused. "Sergeant, we've got classroom training in 20 minutes. "Not anymore," Maya said. "We've got a civilian missing in the northern range, possibly injured. Storm coming. We're part of the search team." She watched their reactions carefully. Jake looked immediately determined. Marcus seemed nervous but ready. Tommy was already moving toward the equipment shed. Derek's expression was hard to read, but he nodded. Brent hesitated for just a moment, then his competitive nature kicked in. "We're ready," he said. 7 minutes later, they were loaded into a transport truck heading north. Maya spread a map across her lap, showing them the sector they would be covering. "The terrain is rough," she explained. "Lots of ravines, thick brush. Matthews is 62, but he's former Army, so he knows how to handle himself. If he's injured, he'll try to find shelter. We're looking for any signs, tracks, disturbed vegetation, personal items. We move in a line formation 10 meters apart. You stay visual with the person on either side of you. Nobody goes off alone. Clear." "Clear," they responded in unison. The truck dropped them at the eastern access point. Dark clouds were already gathering on the horizon, and the wind was picking up. Maya checked her watch. They had exactly 90 minutes before the mandatory pullout. "Let's move," she said. They entered the forest in formation, Maya at the center, calling out the pace. The recruits, despite their earlier attitude, fell into the pattern perfectly. This was different from obstacle courses and push-ups. This was real. A man's life might depend on them. 30 minutes in, Jake called out, "Sergeant, I've got something." They converged on his position. A piece of torn fabric hung from a thorny bush, khaki-colored, like the contractor uniforms. Maya examined it carefully. "Fresh," she said. "The edges are clean. This was torn recently." She looked at the ground, reading the compressed leaves and disturbed soil like a book. "He went this way, downslope. Everyone tighten up, 5-meter spacing now." They moved faster, following the trail. Maya's training kicked in, her eyes catching details the recruits would have missed. A snapped twig at shoulder height. A rock turned over, its wet underside exposed. Matthews had come through here, and not long ago. Then they heard it, a low call barely audible over the wind. "Help! Over here!" "Sound off your position," Maya shouted. Down here, the voice came back, strained with pain. They found him at the bottom of a steep ravine, about 20 feet down. John Matthews was lying against a tree, his right leg bent at an unnatural angle. His face was pale, slick with sweat despite the cooling temperature. Mr. Matthews, I'm Staff Sergeant Chen. We're going to get you out, Maya called down. She turned to the recruits. Brent, Marcus, start setting up the rope system we practiced. Jake, get on the radio and call in our position. Tommy, break out the first aid kit. Derek, help me secure the anchor points. For the next 15 minutes, everything Maya had drilled into them came into play. The recruits worked with precision, following her instructions exactly. Brent and Marcus rigged the rope system using techniques Maya had made them practice until they could do it blindfolded. Derek secured the anchor points to 2 sturdy trees, testing the weight capacity the way she had taught him. Maya rappelled down first, her movements smooth and controlled. When she reached Matthews, she quickly assessed his injuries. Compound fracture of the tibia, possible internal injuries, severe dehydration. He needed a hospital and fast. How'd you find me? Matthews asked through gritted teeth. We had a good team, Maya said simply. She splinted his leg with the materials from the first aid kit, working quickly but carefully. Above them, thunder rumbled. We've got maybe 30 minutes before this storm hits hard, Jake called down. Evac team is en route, but they're 20 minutes out. Maya looked up at the darkening sky, then at Matthews, then at the steep ravine walls. They could wait for the professional rescue team, but if the storm hit with its full force, flash flooding could fill this ravine in minutes. They needed to move now. We're bringing him up, Maya decided. Brent, Marcus on the rope. Jake, Derek, your spotters. Tommy, clear the landing zone at the top. Sergeant, should we wait for the professionals? Derek asked, his voice uncertain. Maya met his eyes. We are the professionals, and this is what we do. Trust your training, trust each other. We've got this. She secured Matthews in the improvised harness, talking him through every step. Then came the hard part. The recruits had to pull a 200-pound man up a 20-foot ravine while Maya guided from below, keeping him from slamming into the rock face. On 3, Maya called. 1, 2, 3, pull. The rope went taut. Matthews rose 6 inches, then a foot. Maya climbed alongside, using her body to cushion him from the rocks. Above, the 5 recruits pulled in perfect synchronization, using the techniques Maya had drilled into them about leverage and teamwork over individual strength. Halfway up, Matthews cried out in pain as his broken leg bumped a protruding rock. Stop, Maya commanded instantly. The recruits held the rope steady without wavering. Adjust angle 5 degrees left. Ready, pull. They continued the climb. 15 feet, 18 feet. Then, finally, hands reached down and pulled Matthews over the edge to safety. Maya scrambled up behind him. The first drops of rain were starting to fall. Tommy, Jake, make a shelter with the ponchos, Maya ordered. Keep him dry and warm. Brent, Marcus, Derek, pack everything up. We move to the extraction point now. They worked like a machine, every recruit knowing exactly what to do. The transformation from the cocky young men who had mocked her 4 days ago was complete. Now they moved with purpose, with teamwork, with trust. As they carried Matthews on the improvised stretcher toward the extraction point, lightning split the sky. The storm was here, but so was the medevac helicopter, its lights cutting through the rain. They loaded Matthews aboard, and the crew chief gave Meyer a thumbs up before the helicopter lifted away into the storm. The 6 of them stood in the pouring rain, exhausted, muddy, but alive and successful. Maya looked at her 5 recruits. They looked back at her with expressions she had never seen before. Not resentment, not mockery, respect, real respect. Outstanding work, she said simply. Let's get home. As they trudged back through the storm toward the extraction point where their truck waited, none of them spoke. But everything had changed. They had gone into the forest as an instructor and 5 recruits who thought they knew what made a good soldier. The storm raged for the rest of the evening, turning the base into a maze of mud and streaming water. By the time Maya and her team made it back to Fort Jackson, Word of the rescue had already spread. They were met at the motor pool by Captain Rodriguez and a medical team ready to check them over. "Outstanding work, Staff Sergeant," Rodriguez said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Matthews is in surgery now, but the doctors say you got to him just in time. Another hour and we might have been looking at a very different outcome." Maya nodded, too tired to say much. "The recruits performed well, sir. They deserve the credit." Rodriguez glanced at the 5 young men standing behind her, all of them soaked to the bone and streaked with mud. "I heard. We'll make sure their efforts are recognized." He paused, then added, "The delegation still showed up despite the weather. They're requesting a briefing on the rescue operation. Tomorrow, 0800. "Understood, sir," Maya said. After they were dismissed, the 5 recruits headed to the showers, but Brent held back. He approached Maya hesitantly, something working in his expression. "Sergeant," he started, then stopped. Maya waited. Finally, he said, "I was wrong about you. We all were. What you did today, the way you led us. I've never seen anything like it." "You all did the work," Maya said. "I just gave instructions." "No," Brent said firmly. "You did more than that. You trusted us when we had not earned it. You put Matthew's life in our hands. That's—" He struggled for the words. "That's what real leadership looks like. I'm sorry for the way I acted when we first met." Maya studied him for a moment. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something more substantial. "Apology accepted, Collins. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." That night, Maya lay in her quarters listening to the rain hammer against the roof. She thought about Matthews, about the recruits, about the split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. She had made the right calls today, but she knew better than anyone that things could have gone very differently. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Jennifer back in California. "Saw your name in the Army Times online. Fort Jackson rescue. You okay?" Maya smiled and texted back, "Fine, just doing the job." Jennifer's response came immediately. "You always say that. Come visit when you get leave. Mom wants to see you." Maya felt the familiar pang. She had not been home in 18 months. The Army was her life, her family, but she knew she was missing things too. Nieces and nephews growing up, her mother getting older. Sunday dinners and birthday parties and all the normal rhythms of civilian life. But she could not imagine being anywhere else. The next morning arrived clear and bright, as if the storm had washed the world clean. Maya put on her dress uniform for the briefing, making sure every detail was perfect. She arrived at the conference room at 0745 to find the 5 recruits already there, also in dress uniforms, standing at attention. "At ease," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Captain Rodriguez said the delegation wanted to hear about the rescue," Jake explained. "He requested we attend." Before Maya could respond, the door opened and the delegation filed in. 3 men and 2 women, all in expensive suits, carrying leather folders and radiating the self-importance that came with Washington positions. Behind them came Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks and several other senior officers. The lead delegate, a woman in her mid-50s with steel-gray hair, took the seat at the head of the table. "I'm Deputy Undersecretary Patricia Blackwood from the Department of Defense," she announced. "We're here conducting an assessment of training effectiveness at Fort Jackson. When we heard about yesterday's rescue operation, we decided it would be an excellent case study. Staff Sergeant Chen, please walk us through the operation." Maya stood and delivered a concise after-action report, focusing on the facts: the missing contractor, the weather conditions, the search and rescue procedures. She made sure to highlight the recruits' performance, noting specific actions each had taken. When she finished, Blackwood leaned forward. "Staff Sergeant, these recruits had only been under your instruction for 4 days, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And yet they performed a complex rescue operation in deteriorating conditions without error." "They performed admirably, ma'am. They trusted their training and executed properly." One of the male delegates, a younger man with designer glasses, spoke up. "I've reviewed your service record, Staff Sergeant Chen. Impressive. 2 combat tour, Bronze Star, numerous commendations. But I notice you've been passed over for promotion to Sergeant First Class twice now. Any idea why?" The room went very quiet. Maya felt every eye on her. This was dangerous territory. She knew exactly why she had been passed over, but saying it out loud in a room full of senior officers would be career suicide. "I couldn't say, sir," she replied carefully. "The promotion board has its criteria." "Come now," the man pressed. "You're clearly an excellent soldier and instructor. Your record speaks for itself. There must be some reason." Hendricks cleared his throat. "Mr. Carson, I don't think this is the appropriate forum." "Actually, I think it's exactly the appropriate forum," Blackwood interrupted. "We're here to assess effectiveness and identify systemic issues. If there's something preventing exemplary soldiers from advancing, we need to know." She looked directly at Maya. "Speak freely, Staff Sergeant. You will not face repercussions for honest answers." Maya took a breath. She thought about staying silent, playing it safe. Then she thought about every talented soldier she had known who had been overlooked, underestimated, pushed aside for reasons that had nothing to do with their abilities. "Permission to speak candidly, ma'am." "Granted." "The first time I was up for promotion, the board cited concerns about my command presence, given my physical stature," Maya said, keeping her voice level. "The second time, I was told that while my technical skills were excellent, there were questions about whether I could command respect from larger male soldiers." She paused. "3 weeks ago, I submitted paperwork to go before the board again. I was told my packet was incomplete, though every document they requested was included." The room was silent enough to hear a pin drop. "I see," Blackwood said quietly. She made a note in her folder. "And these 5 recruits who performed so well yesterday, did they have any trouble respecting your command?" Before Maya could answer, Brent Collins stood up. "Ma'am, if I may." Blackwood nodded. "When we first met Staff Sergeant Chen, we were disrespectful," Brent said, his voice clear and firm. "We made assumptions based on her size. We questioned her abilities. We were stupid and wrong." He glanced at the other recruits, who were all nodding. "Yesterday, she led us through a rescue operation that required technical skill, quick thinking, physical endurance, and courage. She trusted us with a man's life. She taught us what real leadership looks like. If the Army is passing over soldiers like her for promotion while advancing people who just look the part, then the system is broken." Marcus stood up next. "I'd serve under Staff Sergeant Chen anywhere, anytime. She's the best instructor I've had." One by one, the other 3 recruits stood and echoed the same sentiment. Maya felt something catch in her throat. These young men who had mocked her less than a week ago were now putting their own records on the line to defend her. Blackwood watched this display with an unreadable expression. Then she stood. "Gentlemen, thank you for your honesty," she said. "Staff Sergeant Chen, thank you for yours. This assessment will reflect what we've heard today." She looked at Hendricks. "Colonel, I'd like a complete review of Staff Sergeant Chen's promotion packets, along with the board notes from her previous reviews. I'd also like a broader analysis of promotion rates among NCOs at this base, broken down by demographics." Hendricks looked like he had swallowed something sour. "Ma'am, I assure you that Fort Jackson follows all proper protocols." "I'm sure you do, Colonel," Blackwood said smoothly. "And this review will confirm that. Unless it doesn't, either way, we'll know more soon." The meeting ended shortly after. As the delegates filed out, Patricia Blackwood paused next to Maya. "Off the record, Staff Sergeant," she said quietly. "I was Army too. 20 years made it to Colonel before I retired and went civilian side. I know exactly what you're dealing with. The report I file will be honest and thorough. That's all I can promise." "That's all I ask, ma'am," Maya replied. As Maya left the conference room, she found the 5 recruits waiting in the hallway. They stood when they saw her, uncertain. "Thank you," Maya said simply. "What you did in there took courage." "You taught us that courage is not about being the biggest or the loudest," Jake said. "It's about doing what's right even when it's hard." Maya smiled. "You all have learned more in 5 days than some soldiers learn in 5 years. I'm proud of you." For the rest of that day, Maya went about her duties trying not to think about the delegation's visit or what might come from it. She had learned long ago not to get her hopes up when it came to the Army bureaucracy. Change happened slowly, if at all. But that evening, as she was completing paperwork in her office, Captain Rodriguez knocked on her door. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Of course, sir." Rodriguez sat down, looking uncomfortable. The delegation's visit stirred up some things, made some people ask questions that maybe should have been asked before. He paused. "I want you to know that I reviewed your promotion packets myself. Everything was in order. You should have gone before the board." "Sir." "Let me finish," Rodriguez said. "I've been at Fort Jackson for 3 years. In that time, I've watched you train some of the best soldiers we've produced. But I never questioned why you stayed at your current rank. I should have. That's on me, and I'm sorry." Maya did not know what to say. "Things are going to change," Rodriguez continued. "The deputy undersecretary's review will see to that, but change takes time. In the meantime, I want you to know that you have my full support. And for what it's worth, you're the kind of NCO this army needs more of." After he left, Maya sat in her office as the sun set outside. She thought about her 14 years of service, the battles fought both overseas and right here at home, the constant struggle to prove herself over and over again. She thought about 5 recruits who had learned to see past appearances to the person beneath. And she allowed herself to hope, just a little, that maybe things really could change. 3 weeks passed. The delegation returned to Washington, and life at Fort Jackson returned to its normal rhythm. Maya received notification that her promotion packet had been resubmitted to the board. Apparently, the previous incomplete submission had been a clerical error that was now corrected. She tried not to read too much into it. The 5 recruits who had been part of the rescue were reassigned to advanced training under Maya's continued supervision. They had become something of a unit, training harder than any other group on base, and other recruits had started noticing. The story of the rescue had spread, growing with each retelling, until Maya found herself approached by young soldiers she had never met asking for advice or training tips. It was uncomfortable, this sudden attention. Maya had never sought recognition. She just wanted to do her job well and help prepare soldiers for the realities they might face. But she handled it with the same quiet professionalism she brought to everything else. Then, on a Tuesday morning in late October, everything fell apart. Maya was running a navigation exercise with a group of 20 recruits, including her 5, when her radio crackled to life. "All personnel, this is base command. We have a code red situation. Active shooter reported in Building 7. I repeat, active shooter in Building 7. All personnel not responding to the emergency are to shelter in place immediately." Maya's blood went cold. Building 7 was the administrative building. The base school was in Building 7. Right now, at 10:15 in the morning, there were 40 children in that building, the sons and daughters of soldiers stationed at Fort Jackson. Her radio crackled again, this time Captain Rodriguez's voice, tense and urgent. "Chen, respond." "Chen here, sir." "Where are you?" "Eastern training field with 20 recruits." "Get them to the nearest shelter and stay there. The MP response team is handling it." Maya looked at Building 7 in the distance. She could see people running, hear sirens starting to wail. Every instinct screamed at her to move, to help, to do something. "Understood, sir," she said into the radio. Then she turned to her recruits. "You heard the order, double time to the barracks. Stay low, stay together, move." 19 of them started running immediately. But Brent, Jake, Marcus, Tommy, and Derek stayed put, looking at her. "You're not going to the shelter, are you?" Brent said quietly. Maya met his eyes. "I have my orders." "And you're going to follow them." There was a moment of perfect clarity. Maya knew that if she went toward that building, she would be directly disobeying a command. She could be court-martialed. Her career could end. Everything she had worked for could disappear. She also knew that there were children in that building, and she had training, real, combat-proven experience in active threat situations. The MP response team was good, but they were trained for base security, not combat scenarios. "Get to the shelter," Maya said firmly. "That's an order." The 5 recruits looked at each other, and Maya saw them make a decision. Brent spoke for all of them. "With respect, Sergeant, no. If you're going, we're going." "This is not up for debate." "You taught us that courage means doing what's right even when it's hard," Jake interrupted. "You taught us that real soldiers protect people who can't protect themselves. Those are kids in there, Sergeant. If there's something we can do, we have to try." Maya wanted to order them back. She wanted to protect them from the consequences of what they were proposing. But she also recognized the determination in their eyes. It was the same determination she felt. "If we do this, you follow my every command without question," she said. "You stay behind me. You do not engage unless I explicitly order it. And if I tell you to fall back, you fall back immediately. Are we clear?" "Clear," they said in unison. "Then let's move. Jake, Marcus, you're with me. Brent, Tommy, Derek, you 3 go to the maintenance shed and grab anything we can use. Fire extinguishers, tools, anything. Meet us at the north entrance of Building 7 in 90 seconds. They split up and ran. Maya's mind was already working through scenarios. Active shooter situations were chaos, but they followed patterns. The shooter would be trying to create maximum harm in minimum time. The school would be the primary target, which meant the children were in immediate danger. But Building 7 also housed administrative offices, which meant there could be dozens of other people in harm's way. She reached the north entrance just as Brent, Tommy, and Derek arrived with armfuls of equipment. Through the windows, Maya could see people huddled under desks, terror on their faces. She could hear something else too, shouting, and the unmistakable crack of gunfire. "Sir, no, please." A voice screamed from inside, then was cut off by another shot. Maya's training took over. "Listen carefully. We go in quiet. We locate the threat. We assess the situation. Our primary objective is getting people out, not engaging the shooter unless we have no choice." She looked at each of them. "This is real. This is not training. If anyone wants to back out, do it now. No judgment." None of them moved. "All right then. Jake, Derek, you're on evacuation. Get people out this exit as quietly as possible. Marcus, Tommy, you're with me. We're going to find the shooter and determine the threat level. Brent, you coordinate from here. Anyone Jake and Derek bring out, you move them to safety and give them to the MPs when they arrive." Questions. "What if we find the shooter?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We call it in and observe unless lives are in immediate danger," Maya said. "If lives are in immediate danger, we stop the threat by any means necessary." She tried the door, unlocked. They slipped inside. The hallway was eerily quiet except for the muffled sounds of crying and the distant echo of footsteps. Maya moved forward in a crouch, Marcus and Tommy behind her, using the walls for cover. They passed an office where 3 people huddled under a desk. Maya put a finger to her lips and pointed toward the exit. They nodded and began crawling toward the door. More gunfire erupted, closer now. It was coming from the 2nd floor, right where the school was located. Maya made a decision. "Change of plan. Marcus, get on the radio and update the MPs on our position. Tell them the shooter is on the 2nd floor school area. Tommy, with me." They found the stairs and started climbing. Maya could hear a man's voice now, ranting about something, words slurred and angry. Another shot, then the sound of splintering wood. At the top of the stairs, Maya peered around the corner. The hallway stretched ahead, classrooms on both sides. At the far end, she could see him, a man in his 30s, disheveled, holding a handgun. He was kicking at a classroom door that had been locked from the inside. "Come out," he screamed. "I know you're in there. You all think you're so much better than me. I'll show you. I'll show all of you." Maya recognized him, James Rourke. He had been a civilian contractor on base, worked in supply. She had heard he had been fired 2 weeks ago for showing up drunk, had threatened his supervisor. Security had escorted him off base. Somehow he had gotten back in. Behind that locked door were children. Maya could hear them whimpering. She had no weapon, no backup, just herself, Tommy, and whatever they could improvise. The hallway offered no cover, just 50 feet of open space between her and Rourke. "Stay here," she whispered to Tommy. If he sees me and starts shooting, you fall back and get help." "Sergeant." "That's an order, soldier." Maya stepped into the hallway. "Mr. Rourke," she called out, her voice calm and clear. "My name is Staff Sergeant Maya Chen. I need you to put the gun down." Rourke spun around, the gun swinging wildly. His eyes were bloodshot, his face twisted with rage and fear. Stay back or I'll shoot." "I'm not armed," Maya said, raising her hands. She started walking forward slowly. "I just want to talk. Nobody else needs to get hurt today." "They fired me," Rourke shouted. 15 years I gave this place, and they threw me away like garbage. Well, they're going to remember me now." "I understand you're angry," Maya said, still moving forward. 20 feet now. "You feel like you weren't treated fairly, but hurting children won't fix that. It'll just make everything worse." "It's already worse. It can't get any worse." 15 feet. Maya kept her voice steady, kept her hands visible. Behind Rourke, she could see the classroom door. Through the window, she could make out small faces pressed against the glass, watching in terror. "It can always get worse," Maya said softly. "But it can also get better. Put the gun down, talk to me, tell me what happened. Let me help you." For just a moment, something shifted in Rourke's expression. The rage wavered, replaced by something more human: desperation, pain, confusion. Then he shook his head violently. No, it's too late. They'll lock me up forever. I might as well." He started to raise the gun, not toward Maya, but toward the classroom door. Maya did not think. She launched herself forward, covering the last 10 feet in a heartbeat. Her shoulder hit Rourke in the chest just as the gun went off, the shot going wild, punching into the ceiling. They went down hard, Maya using every technique she had learned in hand-to-hand combat training. Rourke was bigger, heavier, fueled by rage and whatever substances were in his system. But Maya was trained, focused, and fighting for the lives of the children behind that door. She got her hand on his wrist, slamming it against the floor once, twice, 3 times until the gun skittered away. Rourke threw her off with brute strength, sending her sprawling. He scrambled for the gun, but Tommy appeared from nowhere, sliding into Rourke's legs in a perfect tackle that would have made any football coach proud. Then the hallway was suddenly full of people. Brent, Jake, Marcus, Derek, all of them piling onto Rourke, pinning him down. Within seconds, the MP response team thundered up the stairs, weapons drawn. They took control of the situation, cuffing Rourke and pulling him away. The classroom door opened, and a teacher emerged, tears streaming down her face, children clutching at her legs. "Thank you," she gasped. "Oh God, thank you." Maya leaned against the wall, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fatting. Captain Rodriguez appeared, his face pale. "Chen," he said, "what the hell did you think you were doing?" Before Maya could answer, Lieutenant Colonel Hendricks arrived, along with what seemed like half the base command staff. The hallway became a chaos of questions, orders, and radio chatter. Maya and her 5 recruits were separated and taken to different rooms for statements. The questions went on for hours. What had she been thinking? Why had she disobeyed direct orders? Did she understand the risk she had taken? Did she realize she could have gotten people killed? Through it all, Maya answered honestly. She had made a choice. She had assessed the situation and acted according to her training and her conscience. She understood there would be consequences. It was not until 8 that evening that she was finally released from questioning. As she walked across the dark base toward her quarters, exhausted and uncertain about her future, she found the 5 recruits waiting for her outside the barracks. "We gave our statements," Brent said. "We told them everything, that you tried to order us away, that we refused, that you went in there to save lives, and that's exactly what you did." "You all should have followed orders," Maya said, but there was no heat in it. "You taught us to do what's right," Jake said simply. "We did." Maya looked at these 5 young men who had transformed from arrogant recruits into soldiers she would trust with her life. "Get some rest. We'll deal with whatever comes tomorrow." But as she finally reached her quarters and collapsed onto her bunk, Maya knew that tomorrow might bring the end of her military career. She had disobeyed a direct order. The fact that it had worked out did not change that. The army had rules for a reason. Maya did not sleep that night. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, running through the events of the day over and over. Every choice, every decision, every moment when things could have gone differently, when children could have died, when her recruits could have been hurt. At 0500, there was a knock at her door. Captain Rodriguez stood there, his expression unreadable. "You're wanted in the colonel's office," he said. "Now." Maya dressed quickly in her uniform, making sure every detail was perfect. If this was the end, she would face it with dignity. As she walked across the base in the pre-dawn darkness, she thought about her 14 years of service. She thought about the soldiers she had trained, the lives she had touched, the difference she hoped she had made. She thought about her mother, who had cried when Maya first enlisted, terrified of losing her daughter. She thought about her sister Jennifer, who still did not fully understand why Maya had chosen this life. She thought about every person who had underestimated her, doubted her, passed her over. And she thought about 5 recruits who had learned that real strength had nothing to do with size. Lieutenant Colonel Hendrix's office was crowded. The colonel himself sat behind his desk, his face stern. Captain Rodriguez stood to one side, and there, to Maya's surprise, sat Deputy Undersecretary Patricia Blackwood, who had returned from Washington. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Hendrix began, "do you understand the severity of disobeying a direct order during an active threat situation?" "Yes, sir," Maya said. "Do you understand that your actions yesterday put yourself and 5 recruits at risk?" "Yes, sir." "Do you understand that you could face court-martial for those actions?" Maya met his eyes steadily. "Yes, sir. I understood all of that when I made the decision. But there were children in danger. I had training and experience that could help. I could not stand by and do nothing." Hendrix leaned back in his chair. "I've spent the last 18 hours reviewing statements from everyone involved. The MPs, the teachers, the parents, the recruits." He paused. "I've also received a very interesting phone call from the Secretary of the Army himself, who received a call from a very grateful senator whose 8-year-old granddaughter was in that classroom you protected." Maya said nothing. "The MP response team would have reached that hallway approximately 90 seconds after you engaged Rourke," Hendrix continued. "In those 90 seconds, Rourke could have fired through that classroom door. He could have killed or wounded multiple children. Instead, you stopped him." He paused. "You also directly violated orders. As your commanding officer, I should bring you up on charges." The room was silent. Then Patricia Blackwood spoke. "May I, Colonel?" Hendrix nodded. Blackwood stood and faced Maya. 3 weeks ago, I came to this base as part of a standard assessment. What I found was a deeply talented NCO who had been systematically overlooked for advancement. I filed a report recommending immediate review of promotion practices at Fort Jackson and across the Army. She pulled a folder from her briefcase. "Yesterday, before the shooting incident, I received approval from the Secretary of the Army to conduct a broader investigation into discrimination in NCO promotions. Your case, Staff Sergeant Chen, will be the foundation of that investigation." Maya tried to process what she was hearing. "And then yesterday happened," Blackwood continued. "You made a choice that was both heroic and technically insubordinate. You put yourself at risk to protect children. You led 5 barely trained recruits into a crisis situation and got everyone out alive." She smiled slightly. "The optics of court-martialing you right now would be, shall we say, problematic for the Army." "Ma'am, I don't want special treatment," Maya said firmly. "If I violated regulations, I should face the consequences." "And that's exactly why you won't," Hendrix said, speaking up again. "Because you understand that rules have purpose. You didn't disobey orders lightly or out of ego. You made a tactical decision in a crisis situation, and it saved lives." He stood and came around his desk. "Here's what's going to happen. There will be a formal inquiry into yesterday's incident. The findings will note that you acted with exceptional judgment under extreme circumstances. The 5 recruits who assisted you will receive letters of commendation. You will receive the Soldier's Medal for heroism not involving combat with an armed enemy." He picked up another folder from his desk. And effective immediately, you are promoted to Sergeant First Class. Your promotion board was scheduled to meet in 2 weeks, but given the circumstances, we've accelerated the timeline. Congratulations, Sergeant Chen. Maya felt the world tilt slightly. After all these years, after being passed over, held back, underestimated, it was actually happening. Thank you, sir, she managed to say. Don't thank me, Hendrik said. You earned this 10 times over. The fact that it took this long is something the Army needs to address, and we will. He extended his hand. Fort Jackson is lucky to have you. As Maya left the colonel's office an hour later, her head was spinning. Sergeant First Class, the commendation, the investigation that might actually change things for other soldiers facing what she had faced. She found the 5 recruits waiting outside, clearly having heard the news. They stood at attention when they saw her. At ease, Maya said, then smiled. I hear you're getting commendations. We heard about your promotion, Brent said. It's about damn time. Then he caught himself. Sergeant First Class. Maya laughed, actually laughed. It's been a long few days. Sergeant, Jake said, more serious now. What you did yesterday. You saved those kids. You could have been killed, but you did it anyway. We all did it, Maya corrected. Every one of you made the same choice I did. You could have followed orders and stayed safe. Instead, you chose to help people who needed it. That's what being a soldier really means. Over the next few weeks, life slowly returned to normal, though it was a new kind of normal. Maya began her new duties as Sergeant First Class, taking on additional responsibilities and training even more recruits. The 5 who had been with her through everything stayed close, forming the core of a new advanced training program she was developing. The investigation into promotion practices began, and Maya found herself telling her story over and over to review boards and committees. It was exhausting, but she saw real change starting to happen. New guidelines, oversight protocols, training for promotion boards on unconscious bias. One afternoon, 6 weeks after the shooting, Maya was called to the conference room for what she thought was another meeting about the investigation. Instead, she found it filled with people. The 5 recruits, Captain Rodriguez, Patricia Blackwood, who had made another trip from Washington, and standing in the front of the room, John Matthews, the civilian contractor they had rescued, walking with a cane but otherwise healthy. Mr. Matthews, Maya said, surprised, how are you? Better than I'd be if you and your team had not found me, he said warmly. He gestured to the wall, where a plaque had been mounted. The base commander wanted to do something to recognize what you all did. This training facility is being renamed the Chen Leadership Center. Maya stared at the plaque, her name engraved in brass, words beneath it. Dedicated to the proposition that true strength lies not in size or volume, but in skill, courage, and the wisdom to lead others toward their better selves. I don't know what to say, Maya admitted. Say you'll keep training soldiers the way you trained these 5, Matthews replied, gesturing to Brent and the others. Say you'll keep showing people that leadership looks different than they expect. Say you'll keep making the hard choices that save lives.